Lady Greymont is forbidden from entering any lighthouse on my coast, the Duke announced, signing the order without reading the warning his wife had placed beneath it. He then gave Eliza's trust, income, and keepers to Marcus Greymont, the cousin she had accused of falsifying repair accounts. The Harbour Council chamber fell silent except for the scratch of Sebastian's pen beyond the tall windows. Fog pressed against the glass until the afternoon looked colourless. Eliza stared at the order bearing her husband's signature. "The coast is not yours to gamble with," she said. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "The Greymont coast has belonged to my family for 3 centuries. The land has. The sea has buried men who made the same mistake." Several merchants lowered their eyes. They knew she was right. During 8 years as head of the Lighthouse Trust, Eliza had replaced rotting signal masts, redrawn the northern approach, and reduced winter losses by more than half. Yet not one of them challenged the Duke. Marcus leaned against the council table, immaculate in a dark green coat. "My cousin's devotion has become an obsession. Merchants are avoiding Greymont because she sees disaster in every wave." Eliza turned to Sebastian. Beneath his hand lay her written warning about missing lamp oil, altered compass housings, and payments made to keepers who did not exist. "Read the final warning," Eliza said. "If you still believe I am mistaken afterward, I will surrender the keys myself." For one suspended moment, Sebastian looked at the figures she had circled, the missing oil, the altered instruments, and the payments made to keepers who did not exist. Then he placed Marcus's appointment directly across her warning. The wet wax from his newly signed order bled onto her calculations, burying the final column beneath the Greymont crest. "I have already made my decision." The words struck more deeply than the public accusation. 3 nights earlier, he had promised to examine every account. That promise had been given in their private sitting room, beneath the portrait painted during the first year of their marriage, when he had still listened when she spoke. Now, he extended his hand. "The keys, Eliza." The brass ring at her waist held 7 keys. 6 belonged to the lighthouse stations. The smallest opened the trust office, where the widow's pensions and keepers' wages were recorded. "If I surrender these," she said quietly, "Marcus will control every signal between Saint's Head and the widow's teeth. That is precisely what I have authorized." "And my allowance?" Sebastian's expression shifted, but only for an instant. He knew her marriage settlement connected her separate income to her service as trustee. "You will receive whatever is appropriate through my household secretary." "Not independence, then. Permission." Eliza removed the ring and placed it on the table. Marcus reached for it, but she kept one finger pressed against the brass. "Every man lost after this hour belongs to the decision made in this room." Sebastian's face hardened. "Enough." She released the keys. By sunset, Marcus's men had barred Eliza from the trust office and dismissed the 6 senior keepers who had served under her. 2 had disabled sons. Another supported the widow of a keeper killed during the Great Storm. Without their wages, those families would not last a month. Eliza returned to the harbour after dark. She could no longer enter the lighthouse, but Sebastian's order said nothing about the key. Fog smothered the water. The main beacon burned above the cliffs, its light strangely steady. A proper reflector swept its beam across the sea at measured intervals. This one did not move. Then a pilot boat emerged from the whiteness. It carried no crew. A second empty boat drifted behind it, followed by a third. Their lanterns were extinguished, their ropes cleanly cut. Each belonged to a merchant ship expected before midnight. No wreckage followed, no bodies, no distress guns had sounded. Eliza stepped into the nearest boat before Marcus's watchman noticed her. The deck was wet, but there were no signs of collision. A compass remained fixed beside the tiller. She turned the brass case east. The needle continued pointing south. She turned it west. Still south. Her father, a naval surveyor, had taught her never to trust an instrument merely because it wore polished brass. Eliza loosened the rim with the pin from her hair. Beneath it lay a thin sliver of lodestone. Stamped into the dark metal was the Greymont crest. A chill passed through her. The crest meant the lodestone had been cut or stored inside a ducal workshop. Someone with access to the estate had altered the compass before the pilot boat left shore. Someone Marcus could now protect. Boots struck the quay behind her. "My lady," called Mr. Vale, Marcus's newly appointed harbour master. "You are violating His Grace's order." I am standing in a pilot boat. You will step out. A pale light moved within the fog before Eliza could answer. At first, she thought it was the moon. Then, the shape sharpened into 3 mast lamps, arranged in a triangle. A 4th ship was approaching Greymont Harbour. Eliza looked toward the lighthouse. Its beam remained fixed toward the safe channel, but the vessel was turning north, following a false bearing directly toward the Widow's Teeth. She seized the emergency lantern from the pilot boat. "Ring the reef bell," she ordered. Vale blocked the ladder. "Only the harbour master may issue a signal. You have less than 6 minutes. My orders come from Lord Marcus." The ship's lamps vanished, then reappeared nearer the rocks. Eliza swung the lantern at Vale's face, forcing him back, and climbed onto the quay. The dismissed keepers were gathered beyond the warehouse gates, watching helplessly. "Red over white," she shouted to them. "Reef warning." They moved before Vale could stop them. One man ran for the bell. 2 seized signal lanterns from the customs shed. Eliza climbed the iron ladder beside the harbour mast, her skirts tangling around her boots as the first keeper hauled the red lamp upward. Below, Marcus's men shouted for her arrest. Above the fog, the ship's bow emerged far too close to the black teeth of stone. Eliza fastened the red lamp over the white and swung both lights toward the vessel. For one terrible moment, nothing changed. Then a sail collapsed. The ship began turning. Its hull missed the first reef by yards. A cheer rose from the keepers, but Eliza did not join it. As the vessel passed the harbour wall, she saw its name painted across the bow. The Mercy Jane. It was not scheduled to arrive at Greymont. More troubling still, a man stood alone at its stern, holding a blue glass lantern, the forbidden signal used to summon ships to the abandoned military cove beneath the eastern lighthouse. He raised the lantern once in Marcus's direction. Marcus answered from the quay, with the smallest lighthouse key in his hand. Marcus closed his fingers around the smallest lighthouse key and slipped it into his coat. The gesture lasted less than a second, but Eliza saw it clearly from the signal mast. So did the man aboard the Mercy Jane. His blue lantern disappeared beneath his cloak. The ship corrected its course, avoided the harbour mouth, and sailed eastward along the cliffs toward the abandoned military cove. "Bring Lady Greymont down," Marcus ordered. 2 watchmen climbed the ladder. Eliza descended before they could lay hands on her, holding the altered compass beneath her cloak. Sebastian strode onto the quay as her boots reached the stones. He wore no greatcoat, as though he had left the house in haste. His gaze moved from the warning lamps to the dismissed keepers, then settled on Eliza. "What have you done?" "She saved that ship," one of the keepers said. Marcus stepped between them. "She issued an unauthorized reef signal and nearly drove a vessel onto the western shoals." "The vessel was already turning toward the Widow's Teeth," Eliza replied. "Its compass had been altered." She drew the brass instrument from beneath her cloak. Sebastian reached for it, but Marcus spoke first. "A pilot's compass taken from an empty boat proves nothing. She could have tampered with it herself." The accusation produced exactly the hesitation Marcus wanted. Eliza watched it enter her husband's face. "Then question the pilot who used it," she said. "There was no pilot aboard," Sebastian answered. "Precisely." She opened the compass and showed him the lodestone stamped with his crest. "This came from a Greymont workshop. Someone placed it beneath the rim to pull the needle south. The 3 missing ships may have followed the same false bearing." Sebastian examined the crest. Marcus gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Hundreds of tools carry that mark. Eliza controlled the lighthouse workshops until this afternoon. Which means I could have taken one without placing it in a compass," she said. "Why would I leave a mark that leads directly back to this estate?" Sebastian's eyes remained on the lodestone. Doubt flickered there, but it did not become trust. "Lock the instrument in my study," he told his secretary. "No one is to touch it." Eliza nearly objected. The evidence would now rest inside the same house Marcus entered freely. Yet, if she refused, Sebastian would call it further proof of guilt. She placed the compass in the secretary's hand. "Record that it came from the first empty pilot boat," she said. "Record the hour and everyone present." The secretary glanced at Sebastian before reluctantly opening his notebook. That small insistence was the only protection Eliza could give the object. Sebastian ordered the keepers away from the quay. When they hesitated, Eliza nodded to them. Arrest would deprive their families of the little food they had left. As they departed, an older keeper named Samuel Reed paused beside her. You taught us the red over white warning, he said softly. Not Lord Marcus. He walked on before anyone could rebuke him. Sebastian waited until the key had emptied. You defied me within hours of giving me your word. I gave you the keys. I did not promise to watch men drown. His expression tightened. You forced dismissed servants to ignore the lawful trustee. I asked trained keepers to save a ship while your harbour master guarded his authority. Marcus approached with Vale at his side. Your grace, the matter is worse than disobedience. The customs shed is missing 2 signal lanterns and a case of emergency flares. Vale bowed. Lady Greymont's former keepers had access. Eliza understood the trap. Immediately, Marcus meant to transform a rescue into theft. Search them, she said. Search their cottages as well. You will find no missing equipment. We shall, Marcus replied, pleasantly. Sebastian looked exhausted rather than convinced, but exhaustion had become Marcus's most useful ally. For months, every dispute ended with Sebastian accepting the explanation that required the least resistance from him. You will return to Greymont House, he told Eliza. Until I determine what happened, you are not to leave the grounds. Am I your wife or your prisoner? Do not make this more difficult. You have already made it simple. She turned away before grief could weaken her voice. At Greymont House, the household secretary informed her that her account had been suspended. Her personal maid had also been reassigned to the Duchess Dowager's rooms. Even the small desk where Eliza kept copies of tide tables had been locked. She was allowed her bedchamber, her clothes, and whatever money she happened to carry. 7 shillings lay in her purse. Before dawn, someone knocked 3 times against her window. Samuel Reed stood in the garden below. Eliza lowered a cord made from knotted curtain ties, and he fastened a narrow oilskin packet to it. Inside was a page torn from the outer Lighthouse consumption ledger. The new accounts say 12 gallons were used every night, Samuel whispered, but the lamp reservoir holds only 8. Eliza studied the columns. Her father had taught her accounts as carefully as navigation. Quantities did not lie unless a person made them. The supposed lighthouse deliveries were too large by 4 gallons each night. Over 6 months, nearly 700 gallons of oil had vanished into false records, or had been moved somewhere else. Why bring this to me? She asked. Samuel looked toward the dark windows of the house. Because my eldest boy was aboard the Mercy Jane as an apprentice. Eliza's breath caught. The ship never sent notice of its arrival. No, my lady, and it was not carrying ordinary cargo. His voice dropped. 3 nights ago, my son sent word that sealed naval powder was being loaded at Bristol under Greymont markings. A floorboard creaked in the corridor behind Eliza. She hid the ledger page inside her sleeve as the bedchamber door opened. Sebastian stood there, fully dressed, holding the brass compass she had surrendered on the quay. Its rim was open. The lodestone was gone. Sebastian stood in the doorway, holding the brass compass she had surrendered on the quay. Its rim was open. The lodestone was gone. Where did you find that? Eliza asked. In my locked study, his voice was low. The secretary placed it in the center drawer and gave me the only key. Samuel remained hidden beneath the window. Eliza could hear his uneven breathing from the garden below. Who entered the study after him? No one. Marcus. My cousin has no key. He has the smallest lighthouse key, although it should still be on the ring you gave him. Sebastian glanced down the corridor, as if Marcus might be listening. You saw him holding a key in darkness and fog. I saw him answer a blue signal from the Mercy Jane. You also claimed the compass contained a marked lodestone. Now, it does not. The implication wounded her more than an open accusation. You believe I invented it. I believe I should have examined the instrument on the key. Yes, Eliza said. You should have. You. His expression tightened at the reminder of another choice he had failed to make. Samuel shifted below the window. A stone scraped against the wall. Sebastian moved toward the sound. Eliza deliberately knocked a porcelain cup from her bedside table. It shattered across the floor, turning him back. I am tired, she said. Unless you intend to search my room, leave me. For a moment, neither moved. Then Sebastian placed the empty compass on her desk. You will remain inside the house tomorrow. Marcus is taking formal possession of the outer lighthouse. And if another ship follows a false bearing, the harbour master will manage it. The harbour master tried to stop the only warning that saved the Mercy Jane. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. Do not force me to choose between my authority and you again. You made that choice before entering this room. He left without answering. At dawn, Eliza found a narrow service stair behind the linen cupboard. She had used it years earlier while inspecting fire exits after a maid nearly died in a smoke-filled corridor. Marcus's men guarded the front doors, but no one watched the old servant's passage. She reached the harbour disguised beneath a maid's grey cloak. Marcus had already gathered the remaining junior keepers outside the trust office. He stood beneath Eliza's former brass nameplate as a clerk nailed his own over it. Every delivery will now require my written approval, Marcus announced. Every signal must be entered into the new ledger. Any man who obeys Lady Greymont will lose his position and cottage. The keepers said nothing. Vale carried 3 locked account boxes from the office to a waiting cart. Beside them stood 6 new oil barrels, marked with the Greymont crest. Eliza crouched behind a stack of fishing baskets and examined the nearest barrel. Fresh blue paint covered its iron hoops. The colour matched the grains she had seen caught in Marcus's cuff at the council meeting. A cooper rolled one barrel toward the Lighthouse supply boat. As it passed over uneven stones, something metallic struck the inside wall. Lamp oil did not clang. Eliza waited until the cooper turned away, then pressed the heel of her hand against the lower bung. Thick oil seeped around it, but only from a shallow space near the opening. A false inner wall had been fitted inside the barrel. The missing oil accounts were not concealing stolen fuel. They were concealing cargo beneath it. She pulled the torn ledger page from her sleeve and compared the delivery mark with the barrel. Both carried the same crooked. Number 7, the clerk's downstroke, bent sharply to the left. A mundane flaw, repeated by habit. She tore a narrow strip from the lining of her cloak, pressed it into the wet blue paint, and folded the stained cloth around the ledger page. Searching my property again, Marcus stood behind her. 2 watchmen seized her arms before she could rise. You told Sebastian the lodestone was in his study, she said. Marcus smiled. Was it not? I never told you where he locked the compass. His smile faltered. Only slightly, but Eliza saw it. Vale pulled back her hood. Several dockworkers turned to stare as the Duke's forbidden wife was dragged from behind the baskets. Marcus recovered quickly. Lady Greymont has been discovered tampering with Lighthouse supplies. Search her. One watchman reached toward her sleeve. Eliza twisted free and stepped onto an overturned crate. These barrels contain false compartments, she called to the keepers. Open one before they remove them. The cooper froze. Marcus seized her wrist. Get down. Eliza kicked the barrel from its wooden chocks. It rolled across the quay, struck an anchor post, and split along a hidden seam. Oil burst over the stones. Beneath the shallow reservoir lay 12 canvas-wrapped cylinders. The nearest package tore open. Not naval powder. Copper compass needles spilled across the quay. Each had been filed thinner on one side, making it easy for a concealed magnet to control them. A murmur swept through the harbour workers. Marcus released Eliza as though her skin had burned him. Sebastian's carriage stopped at the end of the quay. He stepped down and stared at the scattered needles, the false barrel, and the blue paint staining his wife's hand. For once, the evidence required no explanation. The barrel came from your workshop, Eliza told him. The same workshop that produced the lodestone. Marcus spoke before Sebastian could respond. She arranged this. She knew precisely which barrel to break. Sebastian looked from his cousin to Eliza. You said the shipment contained lamp oil, he told Marcus. It was supposed to. And you said Eliza had imagined the altered compasses. She planted these to disgrace us. Sebastian bent and picked up one of the needles. A trace of oil coated the metal, proving it had been sealed inside the barrel before Eliza arrived. He noticed the contradiction. Eliza saw recognition sharpen his face. Then Marcus moved close enough to speak only for him. Your Grace, if the Admiralty learns that false instruments left a Greymont workshop, they will seize the harbour while they investigate. Your creditors will demand payment by week's end. Whatever you suspect, we must contain this first. Fear replaced recognition. Sebastian straightened. Close the quay, he ordered. No one is to speak of what was found. Eliza stared at him. 3 ships are missing, and I will find them without destroying this family. Marcus's relief was almost invisible. Sebastian ordered the needles taken to Greymont House and allowed the false barrel to remain under guard. Yet as Eliza was escorted away, She saw Marcus watching the strip of blue-stained cloth clenched inside her hand. His expression had changed. He no longer regarded her as an inconvenient wife. He regarded her as the only person standing between him and whatever waited inside the abandoned cove. Marcus watched the strip of blue-stained cloth in Eliza's hand as the watchman escorted her toward Greymont House. Before the carriage door closed, she slipped the cloth into the cuff of Samuel Reed's youngest daughter, who stood among the keeper's families near the warehouse wall. "Take it to your father," Eliza whispered. "Tell him to keep it dry." The girl nodded and vanished into the crowd. Marcus saw only Eliza's empty hand when he reached the carriage. "What did you give her?" "A reason not to trust you." He searched the seat and floor before allowing the driver to leave. Back at the house, Eliza was confined to the morning room under guard. An hour later, shouting rose from the harbour road. The surviving ship had finally entered the quay. The Mercy Jane had returned without its blue lantern and with 3 wounded sailors aboard. Its captain demanded to speak with the person who had raised the reef warning. Marcus arrived first. By the time Sebastian permitted Eliza into the library, the captain was seated beside the fire with a bandage around his temple. Marcus stood behind him, one hand resting on the chair. "Captain Hale confirms that Lady Greymont's signal nearly wrecked his vessel," Marcus said. The captain looked up sharply. "That is not what I said." Marcus's fingers tightened against the chair. Hale continued, "Her warning saved us. Our compass pulled south, and the lighthouse beam held steady when it should have swept. Without the red over white signal, we would have struck the reef." Sebastian's gaze moved toward Eliza. "Why did you sail for the eastern cove?" she asked. "We did not intend to. 2 armed boats approached us inside the fog. Their men wore Greymont harbour coats. They ordered us to follow a blue lantern or be fired upon." Marcus gave a weary sigh. The captain suffered a blow to the head. "I remember the crest on their buttons. Uniforms can be stolen." Eliza stepped nearer the captain. "What cargo did they want?" Hale glanced toward Sebastian. 16 cases of naval powder, shipped under a sealed government order." The Duke's face changed. "I issued no such order. The papers carried your signature." Eliza understood then. Marcus was not simply stealing cargo. He was using Greymont authority to divert military supplies into the abandoned cove, then sending empty pilot boats back, so the ships appeared lost at sea. The 3 missing vessels might still be hidden there. A servant rushed into the library. "Your Grace, smoke has been sighted above the eastern cliffs." Marcus turned toward the window. For the first time, genuine alarm crossed his face. "If powder is stored in the old cove," Eliza said, "the cliff chambers could explode." Sebastian ordered horses immediately. "You are staying here," he told her. "No one else knows the ventilation shafts beneath the eastern lighthouse. My engineers have maps. I corrected those maps 6 years ago after the winter collapse. The northern shaft is sealed." Marcus's voice sharpened. "She has already disobeyed you twice." "And saved a ship twice," Captain Hale said. Sebastian looked between them. Pride fought necessity in his expression. Finally, he held out his hand. "You will ride beside me and follow my orders." "I will ride beside you," Eliza replied. "The rest depends upon whether your orders in danger lives." They reached the eastern lighthouse as smoke poured from cracks in the cliff. The keeper Marcus had appointed stood outside with a bucket, too frightened to approach the lower passage. "The chamber door is locked," he said. Marcus produced the smallest lighthouse key. Eliza watched him insert it into the rusted door beneath the tower. It turned perfectly. The chamber beyond was stacked with powder cases bearing naval seals. Flames licked along a trail of spilled oil toward them. "Water!" Sebastian shouted. "It will spread the burning oil," Eliza said. "Sand and wet sailcloth." She directed the men to smother the trail while she climbed the narrow stair to the lamp room. The smoke vent could draw the flames upward if opened in the correct sequence, but the mechanism had not moved in decades. Marcus seized her arm. "If you open those vents, the draft may feed the fire. If I do nothing, the heat will reach the powder." "You are guessing." Eliza looked directly at Sebastian. "My father designed this system. You have seen me test it." He had. During the first spring of their marriage, Sebastian had held the lamp while she crawled through the shaft and marked every damaged hinge. That memory passed between them. "Let her work," he ordered. Eliza pulled the western lever, then the southern chain. Nothing happened. Below, A powder case split with a sharp crack. She wrapped her hands in her skirt and hauled the chain again. Rust tore into her palms. The vent opened, drawing black smoke away from the chamber as the men smothered the final flames. When Eliza returned below, blood ran from both hands. The powder was safe. So were the men. Marcus stood beside the stacked cases, speaking to two harbour officials who had arrived after the danger passed. My inspection revealed the smuggled cargo, he told them. Fortunately, I understood the ventilation system well enough to direct Lady Greymont. Eliza stopped. Sebastian had heard him. Captain Hale had also followed them into the chamber, and now stared at Marcus with open disgust. She directed every movement, Hale said. You tried to stop her. Marcus ignored him and lifted a document from the topmost case. This transfer order bears Lady Greymont's trust seal. The officials turned toward her. The wax impression was unmistakable, the lighthouse tower, surrounded by 7 stars. Only Eliza had possessed that seal until Sebastian removed her authority. She arranged the shipments before I took control, Marcus said, then created a rescue to appear innocent. Sebastian took the document. Eliza's burned hands trembled, but not from pain. Look at the date, she told him. Then, compare it with the page you refused to read in the council chamber. My warning lists the first false oil delivery on that same day. The warning remained in Sebastian's possession. He now had the captain, the altered needles, the hidden powder, and a dated document before him. For the first time, no one stood between him and the truth except his own willingness to see it. Eliza held his gaze. Read the page now. Read the page now. Eliza's words echoed through the powder chamber. Sebastian held the false transfer order in one hand. The other remained at his side, close enough to reach the warning folded inside his coat. Marcus's confidence finally cracked. My lord, this is neither the time nor the place to indulge another performance. No, Eliza said, it is the precise place. 16 cases of stolen powder are stacked behind you, and 3 ships are missing because Sebastian gave you control of the coast. Marcus stepped toward her, but Captain Hale blocked him. Sebastian drew the warning from his coat. Smoke had stained its edges. Eliza watched him unfold the pages until he reached the final one, the page listing, false oil deliveries, impossible quantities, and the crooked number 7 repeated in Marcus's accounts. He read the first line. A horse galloped into the yard outside. Moments later, Vale entered with an Admiralty officer and 4 armed men. The officer introduced himself as Commander Ashford, then presented a sealed warrant. Government powder has been diverted under the authority of the Greymont Lighthouse Trust. Until responsibility is established, the harbour and all trust property are subject to seizure. Marcus bowed with practiced gravity. Commander, we have just discovered that the former trustee authorized these shipments. He handed Ashford the transfer order bearing Eliza's seal. Sebastian still held her warning. Tell him when I reported the false deliveries, Eliza said. Every face turned toward the Duke. He could have stated the truth in a single sentence. He could have said she had warned him before he transferred authority to Marcus. Instead, his eyes moved to the naval cases, the warrant, and the armed men who could strip him of the harbour before nightfall. My wife has been unwell, he said. Her actions regarding the trust have become increasingly erratic. The betrayal was quiet. That made it worse. Captain Hale swore beneath his breath. Eliza felt something inside her go still. Not break. Breaking implied that something remained worth repairing. This was colder. A door closing from the inside. Ashford examined her burned hands. Did you authorize the powder transfer? No. Is that your seal? It is an impression of it. Who held the seal on the date shown? I did. Marcus spread his hands as though the matter were settled. Eliza faced Sebastian. You know why that document cannot be genuine. His gaze dropped. Months earlier, after a storm destroyed the trust office roof, Eliza had placed the seal in Sebastian's own safe for 12 days. The transfer order was dated during that period. Only he could confirm it. Marcus leaned close to him. If you dispute the order now, Ashford will search the house, the workshops, and every private account. Your father's unpaid naval loans will become public. The family will not survive the scandal. Sebastian's father had died, leaving concealed debts and a reputation Sebastian had spent years protecting. Marcus knew exactly where to press. Ashford removed a prepared statement from his case. If your grace confirms that the Duchess acted without your knowledge, the Admiralty may leave the harbour under temporary Greymont supervision while she is questioned. Eliza looked at the document. Marcus had prepared the choice before the officer arrived. Signing it would do more than accuse her. It would leave him in control of the harbour during the investigation and give him lawful access to remove whatever remained inside the cove. "Sebastian," she said, "if you sign that, the missing ships will disappear before morning." He looked at her then. For a heartbeat, she saw the man who had once climbed Lighthouse stairs beside her, laughing when the wind ruined his fine coat. The man who had trusted her judgment when no merchant would trust a young duchess with a naval surveyor's education. Then he looked away. "I cannot sacrifice Greymont to your suspicions." He signed. Commander Ashford ordered Eliza confined at the old customs house until she could be taken before a magistrate. The younger keepers were instructed to remain at their posts under Marcus. None protested. Their cottages, wages, and families depended upon obedience. Samuel alone stepped forward. "My lady saved the Mercy Jane, and every man in this chamber." Vale struck him across the mouth. When Samuel tried to rise, Eliza stopped him. "Go to your daughter," she said. "That is an order from no trust, only a friend." He understood. The blue-stained cloth and torn ledger page still remained beyond Marcus's reach. As the guards escorted Eliza from the chamber, Sebastian followed her into the yard. "I will ensure you are treated with dignity." She turned so sharply that he stopped. "You surrendered my name to save yours. Do not call the cage dignified, because you choose softer chains. This is temporary. The trust was temporary. My income was temporary. Your faith in me was temporary." She lifted her bleeding hands. "I will not spend another hour trying to save our marriage." Pain crossed his face, but she no longer softened for it. "My concern now is the missing sailors and the families you have placed beneath Marcus's authority." A harbour bell rang from below the cliffs. Once, twice, then 5 rapid strokes, the emergency signal for a vessel departing without clearance. Eliza looked toward the sea. Through the thinning fog, the Mercy Jane was leaving the abandoned cove again. This time, 3 larger ships followed behind it, the vessels that had vanished before reaching Greymont harbour. Their decks were crowded with armed men. Between them sailed a smaller naval cutter, flying a false Greymont flag. Commander Ashford stared at the formation. That cutter carries the Admiralty payroll for the Southern Fleet. Marcus had used Sebastian's signature to keep the harbour open, the officers distracted, and Eliza under arrest. Now the stolen powder was sailing toward a ship carrying enough government gold to destroy Greymont and hang the person whose seal appeared on every order. Eliza felt the guards tighten their grip on her arms. Beyond them, Marcus quietly removed a blue glass lantern from beneath his coat. He raised it toward the departing ships. A matching light flashed from the stern of the Mercy Jane. "Arrest him," Eliza said. Commander Ashford reached for his pistol, but Marcus stepped behind Sebastian and pressed the smallest lighthouse key against the Duke's back like a blade. It would be wise to listen before anyone behaves heroically. Vale and 4 harbour watchmen drew concealed pistols. They had never been loyal to the trust. Marcus had installed them to control the key, silence the keepers, and prevent any warning from reaching the sea. Sebastian stared at his cousin. "You have condemned this family." "No, you condemned it when you chose your reputation over the woman who kept your coast honest." Marcus's words struck because they were true. He signalled to Vale. The harbour gates slammed shut, trapping the Admiralty officer and his men inside the cove yard. "You cannot escape," Sebastian said. "Every naval station from here to Portsmouth will hunt those ships. They will hunt ships carrying Greymont markings, guided by Greymont instruments, under orders bearing your signature and your wife's seal." Marcus's smile returned. "And before anyone questions me, they will question the Duke drowning in his father's debts and the Duchess already accused of stealing naval powder." A cannon fired offshore. The naval cutter answered with a distress shot. The 3 captured ships moved around it, blocking any escape toward open water. Commander Ashford cursed. "The payroll must not reach the Eastern Channel. A naval frigate will arrive there at first light. If the cutter flies a Greymont flag while attacking a royal ship, this estate will be treated as the centre of an armed conspiracy." Sebastian issued an order for the harbour guns to fire on Marcus's vessels. No gun crew moved. The senior keepers had been dismissed. Marcus's new men controlled the powder stores, signal tower, and gun emplacements. By transferring the trust, Sebastian had handed away every practical means of enforcing his title. For the first time in his life, the Duke of Greymont gave a command on his own land, and no one obeyed. Marcus saw the realization in his face. "Authority is such a delicate thing," he said. "You should have been more careful when giving it to me." Eliza looked past the harbour wall toward the fixed lighthouse beam. It continued pointing toward the safe channel, although the captured ships were sailing east. The beam was not guiding them. It was blinding anyone watching from the sea. Her father had once taught her that smugglers did not always hide in darkness. Sometimes they placed a stronger light behind the crime, so no one could see beyond it. "The Eastern Channel is not Marcus's true destination," she said. Ashford turned to her. "If he attacks the payroll cutter there, the frigate will see everything. He needs the cutter to disappear without wreckage, just as the other ships did." She pictured the tide lines from the maps Sebastian had confiscated. Beneath the eastern cliffs ran a narrow current known as the Widow's Thread. At high tide, it passed behind the outer reef and reached an inlet omitted from modern charts. "The old chalk harbour," she said. Sebastian frowned. "It collapsed before my grandfather was born. The entrance collapsed above the waterline. At the spring tide, a shallow vessel can still pass beneath the arch." Marcus's expression lost its amusement. That was confirmation enough. Eliza faced Commander Ashford. "The cutter will reach the hidden inlet in less than 2 hours. Once inside, they will unload the gold, burn the ship, and release wreckage beyond the reef. At dawn, everyone will believe it sank." Ashford looked toward the locked gates. "Can you reach the signal tower? The tower is useless while Marcus controls the main reflector, but the dismissed keepers can raise a warning from Saint's Head." They were ordered away. "They will return for me." Sebastian stepped closer. "What do you need?" She met his gaze without warmth. "Do not mistake necessity for forgiveness." "I do not. Commander Ashford must publicly place the rescue under Admiralty authority. The keepers cannot be accused of obeying me against the Duke's order." 2-2-A. Ashford nodded. "Granted. And Samuel Reed must be released from Marcus's men." Marcus laughed. "Samuel will not be helping anyone." Vale pulled a blood-stained neckerchief from his pocket. Eliza's stomach tightened. "What have you done? He refused to surrender something you gave his daughter. My men are searching his cottage now. The strip of cloth and ledger page were in danger, but Samuel mattered more than the evidence." Eliza looked at the drainage channel running beneath the powder chamber. It opened beyond the cove wall near the keeper cottages, narrow, flooded, and partly collapsed, but passable at low tide. She had 6 minutes before the water began rising. "I can get the Admiralty men outside," she told Ashford. "The drainage tunnel leads beneath the wall." "You cannot fit through that passage with burned hands," Sebastian said. "Then perhaps you should have read my warning before they were burned." She knelt beside the iron grate. Its lock bore the same 3-notched shape as Marcus's smallest key. Eliza held out her hand. Marcus's fingers closed around the key. "You will have to take it from me." Sebastian struck him. The blow sent Marcus against the stone wall. The key fell, but Vale fired before Sebastian could reach it. The ball tore through the Duke's left shoulder. He collapsed beside Eliza. Commander Ashford's men rushed the watchman, filling the yard with shouts and pistol smoke. Eliza seized the key and dragged Sebastian behind a stack of powder cases. Blood spread rapidly across his coat. "Leave me," he said through clenched teeth. "Get Ashford through the tunnel. You do not command me now." She pressed his cravat against the wound and tied it tightly. Saving his life did not erase what he had done. It protected the innocent tenants who would suffer if the Duke died accused of treason before the truth emerged. Ashford and his men forced Vale back, but could not hold the yard for long. Eliza unlocked the drainage grate. Black water rushed beneath it. She helped Sebastian into the tunnel, then followed with the officers as pistol shots struck the stone behind them. The passage scraped her shoulders and reopened the wounds in her palms. Halfway through, the tide reached her waist. They emerged below the keeper cottages, moments before Marcus's men sealed the cove. Samuel lay injured inside his cottage, but alive. His daughter had hidden the blue-stained cloth and ledger page beneath the false bottom of her mother's flower chest. Eliza placed the evidence in Ashford's hands. Outside, the lighthouse bell began ringing in an unfamiliar pattern. Samuel lifted his bruised face. That is not a reef warning. Eliza counted the strokes. 3, 1, 3. Her blood went cold. It is the old demolition signal. Marcus has rigged the eastern lighthouse with powder. If the tower falls, Ashford said, the royal frigate will have no warning of the reefs. Worse, Eliza replied. The blast will collapse the chalk harbour and bury the payroll cutter inside it, with every sailor still aboard. The spring tide would reach the hidden inlet at midnight. They had 53 minutes. They had 53 minutes. Samuel's cottage became Eliza's command post because it stood beyond Marcus's harbour gates and belonged to the keeper's community, not the Duke's household. Within minutes, dismissed keepers arrived through back lanes and fishing paths, carrying ropes, lanterns, medical cloth, and the tools Marcus had ordered them to surrender. No one asked Sebastian for permission. They gathered around Eliza. She spread an old flower cloth across the table and drew the coastline from memory. The main road to the eastern lighthouse was guarded. The drainage tunnel would be flooded before they could return through it. Only the cliff path from Saint's Head remained open. It is too narrow for horses, one keeper said. Then we walk. Commander Ashford placed the blue-stained cloth, torn ledger page, and one altered compass needle inside his leather dispatch case. Captain Hale signed a statement confirming where each item had been found and who had handled it. Sebastian watched from a chair while Samuel's daughter stitched his wounded shoulder. His face was pale, but his mind remained clear. The crooked number 7, he said, looking at the ledger page. I have seen it before. Eliza waited. In my father's private loan book, Marcus kept the accounts during his final illness. The room went still. How much did your father owe? Ashford asked. Nearly £60,000. And Marcus concealed it? Sebastian shook his head slowly. He enlarged it. I gave him authority to settle the loans, because Eliza had begun questioning the harbour expenses. And he looked at her. Every time you reduced a false payment, Marcus told me you were humiliating my family before merchants. And you believed him because he made my competence sound like disloyalty. Yes, the admission did not repair anything, but it was the first truth Sebastian had spoken without being forced by visible proof. Samuel opened an old cabinet and removed a bundle of letters tied with twine. Her Grace paid 3 keepers' pensions from her own allowance when the trust fell short, he said. She bought the new reef bell after His Grace refused the expense. When my wife died, she kept my daughter in school. Sebastian looked at the cramped cottage, at the patched coat on Samuel's shoulders, and then at Eliza's burned hands. You never told me. I submitted every payment to your secretary. He said the trust was supporting your private charities. They were not charities. They were wages your coast owed. A keeper entered, carrying a wooden case recovered from one of the empty pilot boats. Inside lay 3 blue glass lantern slides and a list of signal combinations. Eliza placed one slide beside the cloth stained from Marcus's barrel. The colour was identical. Her father had ordered that particular cobalt glass from a Bristol maker who marked each piece with a tiny crescent near the edge. Both the lantern slide and the blue fragments once caught in Marcus's cuff bore the same mark. The false oil shipments carried compass parts into the lighthouse, she said. The empty barrels returned with stolen powder concealed inside. Marcus used blue lanterns to direct captured vessels to the hidden harbour. Ashford nodded. The cloth connects his barrels to the signals, and the ledger connects the barrels to his clerk. The captain connects his armed boats to the missing ships, Eliza added. But we still need proof that Marcus ordered the demolition. Sebastian struggled to stand. You are not climbing the cliff with that wound, she said. The eastern lighthouse contains a speaking tube connecting the lamp room to the powder chamber. Marcus installed it last month. He told me it was for emergencies. Eliza understood. Marcus could remain inside the upper tower and command whoever placed the charges below. Then his voice may still be heard through the lower end. Samuel pointed to the map. The lower tube opens inside the tide chamber. We can reach it from the cliff path. Eliza divided the keepers into 2 groups. One would raise a moving warning light from Saint's Head for the approaching frigate. The other would accompany Ashford to the tide chamber and witness Marcus's order. Sebastian reached for his coat. You will stay here, Eliza said. I can identify Marcus's voice. So can Samuel. I can also countermand the authority I gave him. Your commands no longer open doors. Your name on Ashford's record might. She required him to write a full statement. that Eliza had warned him before the transfer, that he had knowingly refused to examine her evidence, that Marcus received control through his signature, and that Eliza had not authorized the powder shipments. Sebastian read the finished confession. "If I sign this, the Admiralty may remove me from every harbour office. Yes, my creditors will see it. Yes, and you will still leave me." Eliza's expression did not change. "This is not the price of getting me back. It is the cost of telling the truth." He signed. Ashford witnessed the document and sealed it inside his dispatch case beside the physical evidence. They left Sebastian under Samuel's daughter's care and began climbing toward the tide chamber. Rain made the narrow path slick. Beneath them, the captured ships entered the hidden inlet one by one. Eliza could see armed men driving the cutter's sailors below deck. At Saint's Head, the first group raised a shuttered lantern. Far offshore, the Royal frigate answered with a white flash. The warning had reached them. Eliza and Ashford crawled through a crack in the chalk cliff and entered the tide chamber. The speaking tube ran along the ceiling, ending in a brass mouthpiece darkened by age. A voice crackled through it. "Set the final fuse," Marcus ordered. "When the tide bell strikes midnight, light all three." 2. Captain Hale and Samuel heard him clearly. Ashford wrote the words in his notebook. They finally possessed proof of Marcus's direct command. Then a pistol clicked behind them. Vale stood at the tunnel entrance with 3 armed men. His face was bloodied from the struggle in the cove, but his hand was steady. Lord Marcus thought Lady Greymont might remember this chamber. Ashford reached for his weapon. Vale fired into the ceiling. Chalk fragments rained down. "Drop the dispatch case." The case containing Sebastian's confession, the ledger page, the stained cloth, the altered needle, and Ashford's written record struck the wet floor. Vale picked it up. Behind him, one of his men rolled a powder keg into the passage. "You have gathered every troublesome piece into a single box," Vale said. "His lordship will be grateful." He backed toward the exit with the evidence. Then he ordered his men to seal Eliza, Ashford, Samuel, and Captain Hale inside the tide chamber with the keg and a burning fuse. Vale's men sealed the tide chamber with an iron bar. The burning fuse hissed toward the powder keg. Captain Hale threw himself against the door, but it did not move. Ashford searched the flooded floor for anything sharp enough to cut the fuse. Samuel tried to smother it beneath his coat, but the cord had been soaked in oil and continued burning. Eliza looked at the rising water around their boots. Then she looked at the old speaking tube. "Lift the keg," she ordered. Together, Hale and Ashford raised it onto a stone ledge. Eliza climbed onto Samuel's shoulders and tore the brass mouthpiece from the tube. Behind it, the hollow pipe angled downward through the wall toward the lighthouse cistern. Her father had designed the tube to carry sound, but also to drain rainwater before it could freeze inside the metal. She drove the small lighthouse key into a release catch hidden behind the bracket. A stream of cold water burst from the pipe. Ashford held the burning fuse beneath it. The flame died 3 inches from the keg. The danger was not over. Water now poured rapidly into the chamber, and the sealed door prevented it from escaping. Within minutes, it rose from their knees to their waists. "The tide vent," Eliza said. A rusted wheel protruded from the opposite wall. Hale and Samuel forced it around, while Eliza guided the chain above them. The outer shutter groaned open. Seawater rushed outward, carrying them through the narrow vent and down the cliff into the inlet. They surfaced beneath the stern of the captured payroll cutter. Sailors imprisoned below deck heard Ashford striking the hull and forced open a cargo hatch. They pulled Eliza and the others aboard, moments before midnight. From the lighthouse, the first demolition bell sounded. Marcus's men lit the 3 main fuses. Eliza climbed to the cutter's deck. "Fire the red flares into the upper windows." The freed sailors found the emergency case. 3 flares streaked toward the tower, illuminating the charges along the outer stair. Offshore, the Royal frigate saw them. Its cannon fired. The shot struck the cliff below the lighthouse not to destroy the tower, but to collapse the exposed stair where the fuses ran. Stone and burning cord fell harmlessly into the sea. Marcus's demolition failed. Yet when Eliza reached the harbour at dawn, she discovered that he had already prepared his final defence. The council chamber was crowded with merchants, magistrates, creditors, and frightened tenants. Vale had returned before them carrying Ashford's dispatch case. The blue-stained cloth, ledger page, altered needle, and Sebastian's signed confession had been burned in the council fireplace. Only twisted metal clasps remained among the ashes. Marcus stood beneath the Greymont crest and announced that Eliza had stolen naval powder, abducted Commander Ashford, and attempted to destroy the Eastern Lighthouse to conceal her crimes. She has manipulated loyal servants and a wounded captain, he declared. Her husband's reluctance to discipline her has placed the entire county in danger. Vale displayed the false transfer order bearing her seal. Murmurs spread through the room. Eliza entered with Ashford, Samuel, and Captain Hale, but without the physical evidence, their testimony could be dismissed as conspiracy or coercion. Marcus had already sent riders to claim that Ashford had exceeded his authority. Sebastian stood near the council table, his wounded arm bound against his chest. Marcus turned to him. "Your Grace, confirm that your wife controlled the trust when these crimes began." Silence settled over the chamber. Sebastian stepped forward. "She did control it," he said. Marcus smiled. "And she warned me that its accounts had been falsified." The smile vanished. Sebastian faced the merchants who had witnessed Eliza's humiliation. "She placed proof before me. I refused to read it. I removed her authority because Marcus persuaded me that protecting my name mattered more than examining the truth." He laid his ducal seal on the table. "I then signed a statement accusing my wife so the Admiralty would leave my harbour untouched. That act gave Marcus the time and authority he needed to move the stolen ships." A creditor rose. "Are you admitting negligence in a matter of treason?" "I am admitting a willing blindness that made the crime possible." The confession would cost him the harbour commission, his political influence, and perhaps the private estates his creditors could seize. It did not prove Eliza innocent, and it did not ask her to forgive him. Marcus recovered quickly. A husband overcome by guilt will say anything after being manipulated by his wife. He lifted the false transfer order again. "This document remains. Her seal authorized the powder." Eliza studied the false transfer order in Marcus's hand. Its seal appeared red, exactly like the wax the Lighthouse Trust had used while she controlled it. Yet one edge had cracked beside the tower emblem, exposing a narrow line of blue underneath. Blue wax had never existed in the trust office during her administration. Marcus had introduced it on the day Sebastian gave him control. The false order had supposedly been sealed 4 months earlier, but its red surface was only a coating. Beneath it lay the blue wax Marcus's men were using now. The proof would be easy to understand and impossible to explain away if the matching wax and seal press still remained inside his workshop. Eliza looked at the smallest lighthouse key hanging from Marcus's watch chain. It opened the chamber beneath the eastern tower. Marcus believed the demolition had destroyed everything inside. He did not yet know that the lighthouse still stood. "You claim that order was sealed while I controlled the trust," Eliza said. "It was. And that you have no workshop beneath the eastern lighthouse? There is no such chamber." The lie was public, precise, and capable of being tested. Eliza turned to Commander Ashford. "Take every witness to the eastern lighthouse before Marcus has another chance to burn what remains." Marcus's hand closed around the smallest key. Eliza met his eyes. "Let us see what your key opens." Marcus tore the smallest lighthouse key from his watch chain. "This key belongs to the trust. Lady Greymont surrendered it voluntarily." "She surrendered a ring containing 7 keys," Eliza replied. "That one was not among them." A murmur passed through the council. Samuel stepped forward. "I counted the keys every quarter for 12 years. The tide chamber key was sealed inside the trust office after the lower rooms were condemned." Marcus turned towards Sebastian. "Your wife's servant expects this council to trust his memory?" Sebastian answered without looking away from his cousin. "The key was absent from the ring when Eliza gave it to you. I saw it in your hand on the key afterward and chose not to question why." That admission established Marcus's access, but Eliza knew it was not enough. A key could be stolen. A seal could be copied. Every fact needed to lead to the next without depending upon Sebastian's regret. Commander Ashford sent armed sailors ahead to secure the eastern lighthouse. The council followed in carriages, while merchants and keepers came on foot. By the time they reached the cliffs, nearly 100 people stood outside the damaged tower. Marcus remained composed. "You will find nothing," he said. Lady Greymont had hours to place whatever she wished inside. Eliza turned to Ashford. "Search me before the door is opened." A female attendant examined her pockets, sleeves, shoes, and bandages. She carried nothing except her wedding ring and the hairpin she had used on the compass. Ashford then searched Marcus. Inside his coat were the smallest key and a blue glass lantern. Marcus did not flinch. "I confiscated the lantern from smugglers." "Where?" Eliza asked. "2. At the harbour." "Which harbour building?" "The customs shed." Captain Hale stepped forward. "That is the lantern used to force my ship toward the hidden cove. I saw the chip along its upper edge when the man aboard the armed boat raised it beside my rail. A crescent-shaped piece was missing from the glass." Ashford wrapped the lantern in cloth and gave it to a naval lieutenant, who recorded the time and every person present. The smallest key opened the iron door beneath the lighthouse. Beyond it stood a narrow workshop, untouched by the failed demolition. False-bottomed oil barrels lined one wall. Altered compasses and blank naval orders covered a long table. At the center stood a brass seal press. Beside it were 2 bowls of wax, one blue, one red. Marcus spoke before anyone else could. "Lady Greymont controlled this lighthouse for years. Everything in this room could have been placed here under her orders." Eliza did not argue. She asked Commander Ashford to place the false transfer order on the table. "Samuel, what color wax did the trust use while I was its trustee?" "Red, my lady. Always red." "When did blue wax enter the lighthouse stores?" "The morning Lord Marcus took control." A junior keeper confirmed that he had unloaded the first blue wax from Marcus's supply cart. Eliza lifted the forged order without breaking its seal. "The date says this was issued 4 months before Marcus became trustee. Therefore its seal must be read all the way through." Marcus's face tightened. She handed the document to Ashford. "Break it." The commander pressed his thumb against the seal. Its thin red surface cracked and fell away. Bright blue wax appeared underneath. A murmur swept through the workshop. Marcus moved toward the table, but 2 naval sailors restrained him. "He made the order after taking control," Eliza said. "Then he covered his blue wax with a red layer, so it would appear to come from my administration." The frightened council clerk stared at the 2 bowls. "Lord Marcus ordered me to warm the red wax separately," he whispered. "He said the older colour would protect his grace from scandal." Marcus turned on him. "You will hang beside her if you repeat that." The threat silenced the room more effectively than a confession. Eliza pointed toward the false barrels, altered compasses, and copied orders. The missing oil paid for this workshop. The barrels carried compass parts into the lighthouse and returned with stolen powder hidden inside. The blue lanterns drew ships away from the harbour. Every part of the operation began after Sebastian placed the trust in Marcus's hands. Commander Ashford examined the seal press. Inside it was a reversed copy of Eliza's lighthouse emblem, still stained with blue wax. He placed the forged order beside it. The shapes matched perfectly. Marcus had claimed the order came from Eliza's office 4 months earlier, but the wax inside it came from supplies he introduced only after receiving control. The broken seal lay on the table. Its red coating had fallen away, exposing the blue wax beneath. The order claimed to have been issued while Eliza still controlled the trust, but blue wax entered the lighthouse stores only after Marcus replaced her. The document could not be genuine. Marcus's final defense collapsed in a single, unmistakable color. The order had been sealed afterward. Marcus could not have produced it on the date written without using the copied glass seal hidden in his workshop. The council moved from doubt into silence. Eliza did not allow that silence to conceal the rest. "You began with Sebastian's father's debts," she said. Marcus's face remained rigid. "You enlarged the sums, then used false lighthouse expenses to pay them through businesses you controlled. When I reduced those expenses, I threatened both your income and your hold over Sebastian." The frightened clerk confirmed each payment as Ashford named it from the workshop papers. Marcus had ordered more lamp oil than the reservoirs could hold. The false barrels carried altered compass parts into the lighthouses. On their return journeys, the same compartments concealed naval powder, diverted under Eliza's copied seal. The blue lanterns guided targeted ships into the hidden chalk harbour. Their pilot boats were released empty, creating the appearance that the vessels had vanished in the fog. Captain Hale stepped forward. "When the Mercy Jane resisted, Marcus's men threatened my crew. They intended to seize our powder and imprison us with the sailors from the other ships." "And the payroll cutter?" Ashford asked. Marcus said nothing. Eliza answered. He meant to steal the gold, burn the cutter, and collapse the chalk inlet. The wreckage would have washed beyond the reef. Greymont would appear responsible, while the false orders ensured that either I or my husband would carry the blame. Vale attempted to escape through the lower passage. Samuel and 2 keepers blocked him. Ashford arrested Vale for armed seizure of royal vessels, attempted murder, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to steal Admiralty funds. The clerk was also detained, though his cooperation would be reported to the magistrate. Marcus looked toward Sebastian. You signed every paper I placed before you. If I am guilty, you are guilty with me. Sebastian did not retreat from the accusation. I signed because you appealed to my pride. I wanted Eliza to be wrong, because admitting she was right meant admitting that she understood my estate better than I did. He faced the merchants, keepers, and council members. She warned me before I transferred the trust. She asked me to investigate. I refused. When the evidence threatened my name, I publicly described her as unstable and signed an accusation I knew was incomplete. Eliza heard no excuse hidden inside the confession. That mattered. It did not erase the choice. Ashford placed Marcus under guard. The workshop, harbour accounts, and captured ships were taken into Admiralty custody. The stolen payroll remained aboard the cutter, and every missing sailor was recovered alive from the hidden inlet. Sebastian lost his harbour commission before sunset. His creditors demanded immediate payment once the concealed debts became public. Rather than use entailed land or reduce tenant wages, he sold 2 private hunting properties and his London residence. The proceeds repaid the legitimate loans, restored the keepers' stolen wages, and compensated the families whose ships had been seized. He then convened the same harbour council before which he had humiliated Eliza. Her brass nameplate lay on the table. Sebastian stood where Marcus had once received her keys. My wife's removal was unjust, he announced. Every accusation against her is withdrawn. The losses suffered by this harbour resulted from authority I gave to a man she had already exposed. He placed the 7 lighthouse keys before Eliza. The trust will no longer depend upon my permission. Its income and property will be held separately for Lady Greymont's management, with Commander Ashford and the senior keepers serving as independent witnesses. The restored settlement granted Eliza an enforceable income, her own residence, and sole authority over the coastal trust. Sebastian also agreed to live separately, unless she invited further contact. He did not ask her to return home. He did not ask whether she still loved him. When the council chamber emptied, he remained beside the table. I thought preserving Greymont meant preserving the appearance that I could not be deceived, he said. I nearly destroyed it because I preferred being obeyed to being corrected. Eliza closed her hand around the keys. You did not fail me because Marcus lied well. You failed me because the truth required humility. I know. No apology can return the moment when I stood before you and asked you to read 1 page. I know that too. His voice broke, but he made no attempt to touch her. If there is anything left for me to do, you need only name it. Repair what you damaged without expecting it to purchase my forgiveness. He bowed his head. I will. For 6 months, they lived apart. Sebastian attended every creditors' meeting, testified against Marcus, and corrected Eliza's name wherever his accusation had travelled. He restored the keeper cottages with his remaining private income and never presented those actions as evidence that she owed him another chance. His letters to Eliza contained no pleas. They reported what had been repaired and what remained undone. She answered only when the trust required it. In early winter, the repaired outer lighthouse reopened. Keepers, sailors, widows, and harbour families gathered beneath the tower. Above its entrance, Eliza's brass nameplate had been restored. Sebastian waited at the edge of the crowd. Eliza climbed the lighthouse steps alone and restarted the rotating reflector. A clean beam swept across the sea, passed over the safe channel, and returned precisely on time. When she descended, Sebastian stood below with the ribbon he had once cut from the keys carefully mended between his hands. I found it in the council chamber, he said. It belongs to you. Eliza, accepted the ribbon. She could have walked past him. Instead, she placed the smallest lighthouse key in his palm. His face lifted, but she stopped him before hope became assumption. This does not restore our marriage. I understand. It opens the lower chamber. Tomorrow, you may help the keepers clear away what Marcus left there. And after tomorrow? Sebastian asked. Eliza looked toward the restored lighthouse. 6 months earlier, he had expected her loyalty while refusing to give her his trust. Since then, he had repaired what he damaged without demanding that she reward him for it. After tomorrow, you may walk beside me again, she said. Not ahead of me, not in my place. Hope entered his face carefully. And if I forget, I will remind you once. And if I refuse to listen, you will lose me forever. I understand. He opened his hand, offering the smallest lighthouse key back to her. Eliza closed his fingers around it. Keep it. Trust cannot survive if only one person is ever permitted to hold a key. Sebastian swallowed. Does this mean you are coming home? No, she said, and his hope dimmed. Then she took his uninjured hand. It means we will choose a new home together, one that belongs to neither your pride nor my pain. His fingers tightened gently around hers. I would like that. They climbed the lighthouse steps side by side. At the lamp room, Sebastian stopped before the final lever and waited. Eliza placed her hand over his, and together they released the restored mechanism. The reflector began to turn. A clean beam crossed the dark water, swept over the safe channel, and returned precisely on time. Once, Sebastian had fixed the light in place because he believed command mattered more than trust. Now he stood beside his wife and let it move beneath both their hands.